I'm Megan Thompson. I'm going to share my screen right now and get us into, I think everyone can see my screen now. So what I'm going to talk about today is forensic accounting, and most people don't know what that is. So I'm going to get a little bit into the details of that and how you can get started as a forensic accountant, and how I got my start. So my story is I grew up in San Jose, sort of a Bay Area native. I went down to UC San Diego and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was a physics pre-med, uh, ended up sort of hating that. Didn't really love it. I switched around majors a little bit and I ended up graduating with a major in psychology and a minor in political science. You may notice that does not say accounting anywhere. So this was not my first, path like out of high school. I knew I was going to be an accountant or anything like that. I, in fact, then went and took the LSAT, which is the entrance exam for law school, and was all prepared to go to law school. I was about to apply to law school. I was going to become a lawyer. And I went to a community college in San Diego and I took an accounting 101 class. And something about accounting, everything just clicked. Things made sense. When one thing goes up, another thing goes down. One thing that's, I think, a big misunderstanding in accounting is people think accounting is a lot of math and you have to be really good at math. It is not math. It is logic. The most complex math equations I do is like maybe a present value calculation, but I have a calculator for that. Some basic algebra. But for the most part, I'm doing logic all day. Something goes up, something goes down. If this happened, then that happened. So if you're really into logic games like I was, accounting is a really good area of study to go into. So I decided from there that I wanted to go into accounting, and I went to Santa Clara University and got my certificate of advanced accounting proficiency, which I believe they still offer. But it basically gave me all of the credits and units I needed and the information I needed in order to become a CPA and become an accountant. So what do accountants do? I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we do, who we are, what kind of people we are. The stereotypes are we just crunch numbers all day. We're very serious. We're boring. We do taxes only. We do spreadsheets. I do spreadsheets, but that's not the only thing I do all day. We just sit at a computer all day, punching in numbers and, running a tape of numbers, and you never interact with anybody else. But in reality, accounting runs the gamut of, anything you can do. Strategic advisors helping businesses grow. You can work internally in a business. You can be a problem solver and a financial detective, kind of like what I do. And they're essential for financial success and compliance. If you get your degree in accounting, if you become an accountant, you're pretty much always going to find work. I mean, there's always accounting jobs to do if you look for them. I'm not going to go too detailed into this, but this is the path to actually getting your CPA. You don't need a CPA to be an accountant. I happen to have my CPA, but then that is a certified public accountant. But you can be a general accountant. You can also get an EA, which is it's a designation in order to do taxes. But the CPA requirements are educational requirement, getting your bachelor's degree. Right now, there is a provision where you have to have 150 semester hours of education. There may be some changes to that in the near future, not really sure. And then you could get a master's degree, an MBA. There is also a master's in tax that you can get. You do have to have relevant work experience to get your CPA. So you need to have 1 to 2 years of supervised work under a licensed CPA. But you can do it in any field. but it has to be under a licensed CPA so they can sign off on your hours. And then there's, state specific requirements for any state. It could be different. Among the states, they really try to make it so that everybody has the same requirements so that it's easily transferable. But you need to check in your state. Right now, we're in California. So in California, it's basically these things. And then you pass the exam. There's 4 sections to the exam: auditing and attestation, business environment and concepts, financial accounting and reporting, and regulation. And each of these, usually go to a study course and learn how to pass all of these. There are 4 sections that you have to take within 18 months, and the AICPA will administer these tests. Then we have to meet ethics requirements if required by state. California does have very rigorous ethics requirements. And then you apply for licensure. And then you just have to maintain your CPA license. We do have pretty stringent continuing professional education. So for CPAs, we have to have 80 hours every 2 years, and you have to have 40 in the first year. So it can be a lot sometimes to get that education in, but it's really important because what we do is so specialized that you really have to go to the education classes. There's a lot of really cool careers that you can have if you're a CPA. So for instance, forensic accounting, which is what I do. You can be a CFO, you can be a sports and entertainment accountant, international accountant, government accountant, environmental, startup and tech, which is especially in our area, there's a lot of startup and tech accountants, high net worth, professors, real estate, corporate, anything you can think of needs someone to take care of the money. If you have a business, someone has to take care of the money. Also, government accounting sounds kind of boring, sounds like the IRS, whatever, but you could be in the FBI or the CIA. I know some people who are, in the FBI who are agents, it's pretty cool. You can get into some really cool careers with the CPA. So what is forensic accounting specifically? So, because that's what I do. So it's applying accounting to an accounting body of knowledge to a court of law. So a lot of people hear forensics, they're like, I'm at a party and I say, hey, I'm a CPA. And they go, oh, you do taxes? I say, no, actually, I'm a forensic CPA. And they say, what is that? Is that dead bodies? And so a lot of people think of, CSI and things like that. And while there are accountants that work in, a criminal space, usually it just means having to do with the law. So I have to, know this area of accounting, whatever specialized area, and then we apply it to the law, and then I act as an expert witness. So I'll do some calculations. I'll be hired by an attorney and their client, either a plaintiff and a defendant, or a petitioner and respondent, depending on what court you're in. And then I'll go in and testify, either in front of a judge, which is called a bench trial, or in front of a jury, which is called a jury trial. And so, it's important that we have these types of accountants in order to have our legal system running effectively. So what do I do on a day-to-day basis? Do I do spreadsheets? Yes, I do. Like I mentioned, I do spreadsheets. I fill out Excel. I try to do pivot tables. Not my favorite, but I can make it work if I have to. But it's really working within Excel is the most a lot of what my analysis relies on is Excel. I don't have a ton, there's not a ton of specialized software, I guess, for my specific area because I work in family law, which I will get into in a little bit. But I do a lot of spreadsheet work. And sit at a computer? Yes, I do. But I also meet with clients, discuss their issues. I had several meetings this morning with clients where we talked about exactly what needed to be calculated, why it needed to be calculated, and go through all of their financial issues. I meet with attorneys. I talk about what their clients need. A lot of times I work in a very specific area of the law, and so I'll know which cases to kind of point the attorneys to. I do not opine as to the law, meaning I don't have an opinion with regard to what law should be applied. But if the attorneys give me their legal position, I can calculate what their clients need. And then I use that law to calculate the claims. And then I go to court and I'll either go in person, which we're doing a lot more these days, or I had a Zoom trial yesterday where I testified all afternoon sitting from my desk, which was pretty nice. That was the norm right after COVID, and the courts are sort of stopping us. They don't really want us to do that anymore. Probably a good reason for it, because people have kind of gotten a little lazy about appearing in court. You're supposed to be professional, you're supposed to be dressed appropriately. Sometimes people don't do that when they're on Zoom. Sometimes their cat will walk by, which is fine. Sometimes their kid will walk in, and that's not fine. And so I think the courts are looking for us to be a little bit more contained. They have a little bit more control over who's in the room. And so, we're going in person more and more. I do a lot of speaking, like right now. I actually spoke earlier today to a group of lawyers at the Santa Clara County Bar Association on the topic of income available for support and calculating spousal and child support on equity compensation and W-2 income. So that was really interesting. Interesting if you're me. I think the lawyers were a little bored, but I think the accounting issues are really interesting, and so I really enjoy speaking on them and teaching people about what I do. So here's some forensic accounting in action. This guy is Michael Spindler. I know him. He is in one of my CPA groups. He testified in this little case, Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard. Just going to play a few minutes of it so everybody can watch and see. This is basically what an expert witness does. He's on direct examination right now, so it's a little more friendly. His attorney's asking him the questions, whereas on cross examination, where the other attorney, the opposing attorney, is asking questions, it'll be a little bit more contentious, a little bit meaner. But I'm just going to play a little clip from here.
Great ideas can come from anywhere. With Wix.
Mr. Spindler, now you indicated that you had listened to Ms. Arnold and she testified on behalf of Ms. Heard relative to economic damages. Have you formed an opinion as to the testimony and opinion rendered by Ms. Arnold?
Yes, I have.
And what's that opinion?
It is not adequately supported and it is unreasonable.
There were multiple elements to that analysis, both damages that related to her film career and to endorsements. Have you analyzed both those issues?
Yes, I have.
What is your opinion of the claims that have been asserted relative to the film career and endorsements?
Okay, well, first of all, with respect to her damages calculation, there was no calculation per se. She initially looked at these comparable actors and seemed to use that as a basis for numbers. She didn't provide the underlying calculation. She didn't provide underlying support. And then it appeared as though in her testimony, she backed away a little bit from that, but she still suffers from the issues of not providing detailed calculations or support for where those numbers come from. And she still, to some extent, appears to be using some kind of comparable analysis.
All right. What is the type of analysis that you think is appropriate here?
Well, I think, and as you heard from the last witness, I think that something that is anchored in facts, taking a look at historical compensation as a basis for anticipating future compensation.
Had you looked at Ms. Heard's prior compensation?
Yes, I have. I've looked at tax returns that were provided for the period of 2013 through 2019.
Why do you want to use historical earnings?
Well, once again, you want an analysis is anchored in fact. I don't believe that Ms. Arnold has done that in her analysis. So here we've got some actual data, we've got some historical compensation, and as the last witness mentioned, that often provides somewhat of a basis for future anticipated earnings. In addition, I believe that Ms. Arnold herself said that she had hoped to be able to look at a renegotiated salary for Aquaman 2 and then use that as a basis for future compensation, that being the new kind of base, if you will.
Okay. So I'm just going to pause that there. So some things I want to point out with that. So this is, typically, I know usually when I'm testifying, it's not in this high profile of a type of case, but it's a very similar situation. So you're sitting there and the judge is asking, or the attorney's asking questions. The judge is sitting next to him, which you can't really see, but probably, I think it's to his left. The judge will be sitting there. On the other side will be the clerk. And so he's sitting in the witness chair, the witness box, right? So a few things I want to point out. So what he is doing right now is called rebuttal. So he is not talking about his own report or his own calculations. He's talking about what the opposing expert did and why she did it wrong. But you'll note that he keeps it very professional and very cordial, and he doesn't attack them, but he does say exactly why their report is unsupported, incorrect, why he doesn't think it's good. Another thing that he does is you'll note he keeps turning his head to the right. Yeah, right. And that's because that's where the jury is. So when you're answering the questions, you're not, even though the lawyer is the one asking you, you should be directing your responses to either the judge if it's a bench trial or the jury if it's a jury trial, because that's who your audience is. That's who you're talking to. And then the last thing is that he's keeping it very simple. He's not using complex jargon to make himself sound smarter. He's not trying to, go above everybody's head. Your job as an expert witness and a forensic accountant is to teach. That's number one. You're assisting the court. You're assisting the jury. You're not there to be the smartest guy in the room and sound super smart. You're there to help them. And I think he does a great job of this here, where he's, the most complex financial item he talks about is compensation or tax returns. He's not trying to go above their heads. He's really trying to teach them what they should know in order to make a proper decision. So that's your forensic accounting in action. So what kind of things do forensic accountants do? There are basically 4 to 5 umbrellas of forensic accounting. So there's fraud, which is the one you hear of the most. That's the most common that people think about when they hear about forensic accounting. So that's a big company, creates a bunch of shell companies, moves money around. That's the Enrons, those kinds of things. That's why accountants kind of lost a lot of respect during that time period and have had to kind of build back. And we have a lot of ethics requirements that we have to meet now, because there's just a bunch of bad actors doing bad things. And, that falls under the umbrella of fraud. So those kinds of analyses. There's also economic damages being more the lost profits and wages. We've got valuation, which is, I have a business, it's worth something. How much is it worth? How do you calculate that? That's something I can do. There's family law, which is what I specialize in, which is divorce work mostly. So people are getting divorced. They have separate property claims. They have support that we need to calculate. How do we do all that? You call me. And then there's trust accounting. So that's in the probate courts. If there's an estate, trust, and you need to calculate how much each one of the beneficiaries should get. Is someone running the trust properly? Those are all possible forensic accounting engagements. I'm sure there's more, but that's what I went through so far. So and economic damages, what is that? So an example would be a wrongful termination or a wrongful death. You get fired, you say, hey, had I not been fired, I would have made this much money. How do we calculate that? Because it's not just your compensation times the number of days or something like that. There have to be additional factors that you calculate in. Or like a wrongful death. Someone gets hit by a car or something happens and they were a key person in this business. Without them, there's a loss of profits to the business. How much would that be? There's also a breach of contract. So celebrities backing out of films, that costs they'd had everything up and running. They were going with this one celebrity and they say, nope, I'm not doing this film. Now they sue the celebrity for that because how much did they lose because of that? And that's the economic damages is what they were calculating in that case, in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, because we're saying that they lost wages, lost opportunities because of defamation and things like that. And then there's this lost profits, calculating a loss of reputation, a but-for scenario, unfair competition, fire damage, and insurance claims. So you calculate, what did you lose because of what happened? And then fraud, there's employee embezzlement, which I've actually seen within my family law cases sometimes. I'll have people who are, I had someone who was a doctor and they're in the process of doing their divorce, we found out that their employee was stealing from them, which was not great. But basically they were changing credit card statements and putting things into the books incorrectly so that they could charge things themselves and the person didn't know about it. And they were a trusted employee. And so they were allowed to both write the checks and use the credit card and do the books. That's why we have checks and balances inside of, you have internal controls inside your business. Otherwise you end up with fraud, employee embezzlement. There's elder abuse. So you have someone who is a caregiver and they fudge the expenses or they just outright steal, take money. Financial statement fraud. So that's sort of those Enron type things where we have something that says what your books are, but that's not really, so you have two sets of books maybe. And then partnership fraud. It's kind of similar to financial statement fraud. We also have valuations. So valuation can be a type of forensic accounting under any one of the other types of forensic accounting also. But it is its own thing where we're valuing a business. So we can value it to buy or sell. So if someone wants to buy your business, you want to know how much it's worth. Like, should I accept this offer? I don't know. In divorce in California, a business is a community asset. Okay. I have to give the caveat. I am not an attorney. I am an accountant. So anytime I'm talking about legal issues, it's because of my experience. I am not giving legal advice. I am not opining as to the law. But generally speaking, when I am preparing a valuation for a divorce, it's because it's a community asset or quasi-community asset, and we're calculating how much it's worth for one spouse to take that asset. So it's just like if you had a house, you say, okay, well, I'm taking this house. Well, the other person's going to want an offset for that. They're going to want to be bought out of it. And so that's why we calculate for divorce. You can do it for closely held company stock valuations if you're trying to issue stock. If you have a partnership dispute, so you have some partners and one of them wants out, or one of them, more often one of them passes away and they have a spouse who wants their fair share. of the partnership. We'll do a calculation for that. Estates and gifts. So if someone passes away or someone gifts a business to somebody, the IRS wants to know how much that business is worth. And so we'll calculate the value of the business for the IRS. And then lost profit litigation issues. So how much was the business worth before something happened? How much was it worth after something happened? You can do any of those calculations. And all of these calculations, they sound like the same thing because they're valuation, but there's different ways that different courts and different groups will accept a calculation. There's a bunch of different methodologies. There are a lot of different ways to prepare a valuation. And then this is what I do is family law. So an example would be income available for spousal and child support. So I calculate someone has a business. I calculate how much money they have available to pay their child and spousal support. Because, you have a business, you're probably running a few personal expenses through, so we might want to take a look and we add back things like, your personal cell phone, maybe your personal car, the things that you're expensing through your business that maybe aren't appropriate to be expensed for support purposes. So income for support purposes is not the same as income for tax purposes all the time. So it's not that they're doing anything wrong necessarily, but maybe there's different adjustments that need to be made. We'll trace separate property. A big misconception in California family law is that people think the second you get married, everything's 50-50. That's not true. There's separate property. If you come into the marriage with something, you can retain your separate property. And I will often trace bank accounts that people brought into the marriage, or, there'll be a house or something that someone had before marriage. And I will show that still exists, or calculate whatever the community's interest is in that. Marital standard of living, which is a component of spousal support, division of property, tax analyses. So I will calculate what everybody has, who's getting what, and figure out an equalization amount, and then evaluation of the business. So again, like I said, it's not 50-50 like people think. It's actually, what you earn during marriage is 50-50. As long as you don't have a prenup. There's a lot of caveats to what I'm saying. There's a lot of different things that could be different, but it's not that everything converts to 50-50. And then I'll do separate property tracings often, accounts held prior to marriage, inheritance. I'll do what's called a Moore-Marsden analysis, which is based on cases, marriage of Moore, marriage of Marsden, and that calculates how much money a community put into a house. Stock option analysis, that's a big one that I do because we're in the Bay Area. A lot of people have stock options and restricted stock units. Equity compensation is a really big area in family law forensics. And then this is the one that everybody thinks I do all the time, which is, you're finding hidden stuff. Not really. People aren't as creative as you think. People don't have as much money as people think. There's not a lot of offshore Cayman Islands accounts that I'm looking for. It's not to say it doesn't happen. But the biggest issues I find when I'm trying to find hidden assets is when the assets have been converted into something that is tangible. Meaning, I have an account with $100,000 in it, and I went and bought gold, and I put it in a safe. And I showed my spouse, hey, look, there's the gold in the safe. And they said, oh yeah, there's the gold in the safe. And then we're getting divorced, and the gold is not in the safe. Who has the gold? Well, one person says, well, I didn't take it. And the other person says, well, I didn't take it. And I can't do anything about that because that's the, possession issue. And if you're lying, you're lying. So that's a real big issue in some of the cases that I have. And then there's trust accounting, which is usually a requested accounting by the trustees to verify that the accounting is being done properly. Their trustees are always allowed to ask for a trust accounting. And so, you can say, hey, I want to see that everything's being done properly. Usually by the time it gets to me, it's because we're in litigation, meaning we're going to court. So we're in probate court, there's a litigated trust. They're saying that the trustee has been managing the trust improperly. And so we have to look at what they've been doing with the money. And so the probate courts have very specific forms. So if you're someone who really likes, say, like a tax type of accounting, but you want to do forensics, then we would recommend that this is kind of the area you want to go in, because it's a lot more like rote, and this is exactly how it's supposed to look. Let me see. I saw a question in the chat. So I'm curious to hear about how you start a career as a forensic accountant. Once you finish school, what type of entry-level experiences will help you become a forensic accountant? I mean, honestly, interning at a forensic accounting firm. Up in San Francisco, there's a lot of great forensic accounting firms. There's some big ones. There's Gersey Schneider and there's CBiz, which are both pretty large firms. There's several other ones, but you can get started by interning in a forensic accounting firm if that's what you're interested in. Or just getting an entry-level job in a forensic accounting firm. You don't need to, a lot of people think if you go into accounting, become a CPA, you have to start in audit at a Big Four or something like that. You absolutely do not have to do that. Audit may help you with forensic accounting because it does give you sort of that background of ticking and tying things, but it's not a requirement. And really no other, besides maybe a tax background, so you have a better handle on reading tax returns, no other background is going to give you a ton of forensic experience, just because the forensic work that we do is very specialized. And so there's nowhere to go for that. I know a lot of people are developing forensic accounting courses now, so you can learn sort of the basics. I would recommend doing that first and seeing what you think, and then just looking for a position somewhere. So that's just a fun little video that Cal CPA has on their YouTube. They have a lot of different stuff on YouTube. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in accounting, to check out the Cal CPA website, check out their YouTube channel. They're really like pushing for, Cal CPA. One of the former chairs of Cal CPA, which is the organization that sort of is the members for California. It's our advocacy, it's a members organization. They do a lot of government work to try to make sure that any bills that are passed are friendly to CPAs, and they keep sort of involved in different things that might change, tax law and things like that. But I highly recommend checking them out and checking out their YouTube channel. They have a lot of cool stuff on there. But they're really pushing for, we are the coolest profession around, is what a former chair came up with, which I think is really funny. I love it. So CPA, coolest profession around. And, just trying to say we're not stuffy like a lot of people think. We don't sit in a back room and not interact with people. And then this is my last slide. It's just funny little court mishaps. These kinds of things happens all the time. Sometimes someone shows up with, in a tank top. Sometimes people can't get their camera working. I've had people show up and not know how to mute themselves, which is really embarrassing, or forget to mute themselves. I had a case a few months ago where we were in a Zoom trial, and one attorney forgot to mute himself and went to talk to his client about what I just did and was like, "Oh, court's totally not buying it, not buying what she's saying." And I was like, I was yelling. I was like, "Mute yourself," because it was embarrassing for me, even though he was bad mouthing me. It was fine, but I hate to see that kind of thing, but it happens all the time. So this is just a funny little YouTube clip.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're
a
trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the up arrow next to the.
So that's one of my favorites because he says, "I'm here live. I'm not a cat." It makes me laugh. I've seen this thing so many times. It makes me laugh every time. But anyway, that's basics of forensic accounting. I know I didn't get into like the tools we use or anything like that. So if anybody had any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, Megan, we have a few questions from the audience. First question from Tiffany. Hello, I am so interested in this topic as an active unemployed CPA. It's CPE provided. I believe CPE stand for Continuing Professional Education.
CPE for this particular presentation? I don't think so. We would have to go through like the CPE requirements. This is just, wow, I didn't provide CPE. I don't know if the library did it, but I didn't do anything.
No, we don't.
But I have lots of presentations that I'm giving. I'm happy to provide. I have presentations I'm giving for the Bar Association, presentations I'm giving for Cal CPA that do provide CPE. So if you're interested in any of those, I'm happy to provide that.
Oh, by the way, is CPE required for forensic accountant?
Yeah, so
okay.
It's required for a CPA.
Oh, CPA.
So the CPA requires it's continuing professional education. It's just our required education, 80 hours every 2 years.
Okay, and you don't need to be a CPA to be a forensic accountant.
You don't. So that's a good question. You don't have to be anything to be a forensic accountant. I mean, you basically just have to be an accountant. But you'll note that I have lots of letters after my name. It's better if you have some credentials because I had to do things to get those credentials. So that person did the same education. To get my CPA, I had to do a certain amount of work. To get my CVA, I had to do a certain amount of work, and then to get my CFF. So you'll know the levels of experience based on that. Also, if you show up to court and you're an expert witness and there's an expert witness on the other side and they have a lot more impressive credentials than you, that could work against you. It also couldn't if you have experience. You do have to qualify as an expert. So when you go into court and you go up on the witness stand, you don't just get to talk. Like that's not the court has to accept you as an expert. And so the attorneys will do what's called a voir dire. And they will ask questions about your experience and your background and why you should be qualified in this particular area of accounting. And if you don't have the qualifications, they'll just exclude you as a witness and they'll say, sorry, you've been disqualified, like get out of here. And you don't get to do anything.
Thank you so much, Megan. Next question. For accountants that have their CPA from other states and move to California, what process do they have to go through in order for it to be recognized?
So I would look at the California Board of Accountancy, the CBA's website. But I think there's quite a bit of portability between states, depending on which state you're from. You may have to, do a few extra, I don't know if you have to take a test or what, but I would look into that through the CBA.
Got it. How is the work-life balance for this career?
I mean, it depends. It is what you make it. I think it's probably better than most starting like auditors, because I've heard horror stories about people having to work, right out of college, working 80 hours a week, although that's not totally unheard of. I personally am self-employed. So I'm not only doing a lot of the work, but I'm managing my staff and I'm dealing with all of that on top of it. So my work-life balance is okay. It's not terrible. I make sure that I have time. I have 2 young children. I have a husband. I make sure I have time with my family. Do I work weekends often? Yes, but am I required to? Probably not. I think also our culture right now is really big on work-life balance. I know I make sure that that's a big part of my office culture, and I want to make sure that my employees have really good work-life balance. Because while I think forensic accounting is very fun and I love doing it, it's not my entire life, and it shouldn't be your work shouldn't be your entire life as far as I'm concerned. So I think you have to find the company that matches what you're looking for in terms of that. And you should definitely, if you're interviewing, ask them that question. Ask them what the work-life balance is. Ask them if you're expected to work, 80 hours a week, or if, everybody clocks out at 4, like they do in my office. It's very important that you find a company that matches what you're looking for.
Thank you, Megan. Do you work remote or in the office?
So we're hybrid right now. I think it's at least for my staff, I think it's important that we sort of see each other. I just find, if I'm being completely honest, I find that when we're not together, and when you're communicating over Slack or text, there's just too many opportunities for misinterpretation, for things to get contentious, or people to get irritated with one another, if that makes sense. I just like having that kind of grounding. We have 2 days a week in the office right now where you see everybody and you're like, oh yeah, you're a human, you're a person. I'm not just talking to you over like a robot over Slack. So that's personally why I do a hybrid approach. I don't think that it really, for this type of work at least, especially, and for a lot of accounting, I don't think that being remote is detrimental, because I think that there's work to do, and if you don't do your work, it's going to be real obvious, and you're just not going to last very long in that position. So, if it were a giant company, maybe I'd have a different opinion, but I'm a pretty small, I have 8 employees. So it's easier to kind of gauge what everybody's doing. But again, that would be something that you would have to see what the company you're applying to does. A lot of people are going back full time into the office. I am not a proponent of that. I like being able to get out of bed and like do my workout and, get ready and just walk to my desk. I think that's helpful for people's mental health. They get to be with their pets. Maybe they get to be with their families. They're still getting their work done. I have no problem.
Thank you, Megan. Do you know if the rate of forensic accountant job openings is expected to grow for graduates in the upcoming year?
Oh, I don't know if it's expected to grow. I don't think it's expected to shrink. I mean, there's always so much to do. There are so few people who do this and so few people who are suited to do this because not only do you have to have sort of an analytical mind, but you have to be social and you have to be personable and you have to be able to be understanding, especially like in my situation, I'm not working for big corporations, I'm working for people. And these people are going through divorce, and this is going to be one of the hardest times of their entire lives. And so if I come in and I'm just like, give me the facts and I just want the numbers, like that's not going to create a good relationship with my client. I have to be a little bit more I have to be almost like a therapist along with being an accountant. So there's as far as I know, there's never a shortage of forensic accounting jobs, especially in the family law space. We're always growing in that area.
Thank you, Megan. What are thoughts about certificate programs in accounting?
Ooh, certificate programs. Meaning like what kind of certificate programs? Like the kind you get on like
I
online
think
or
you got a certificate in accounting in Santa Clara. I remember seeing that on your slide.
I see what you're saying. So
Uh,
I got a certificate of advanced accounting proficiency from Santa Clara University. And that is, I think, a program that still exists. I would have to check. But it's basically it's the units you need to get your CPA. So that program is it's intended to get you to the CPA. So it's helpful in that sense. But it's not it doesn't really you still have to have a degree, a bachelor's degree, I think. I don't know. I would have to look at that. I'm not an expert in what you need to get your CPA.
Thank you, Megan. Question from Christine. Hi, Megan. This was such a fascinating and engaging talk. Thank you for coming today. What was the weirdest and or funniest assignment you've ever worked on?
Oh, weirdest or funniest? Oh my. Weirdest, funniest. I don't know. I've done a lot of weird things. I mean, most of this stuff's pretty vanilla, pretty benign. Um, oh man, I need to have like one of those like in my pocket ready to go. I know I just can't,
That's okay. We can come back to
I
it
can't think of
later.
anything off the top
That's
of my
okay.
head that's funny.
No worries. We can
Yeah.
come back to this when you think of the funniest or weirdest story.
Yeah.
Okay, next question from Eva. How does AI affect future of CPA?
Yeah. We're using AI a ton. So I said we use a lot of Excel, the Excel program. I'm having AI assist me in writing complex formulas now to where I would have spent 2 hours trying to figure out the formula, figure out the parentheses, where the parentheses go and make sure that everything is in the right spot. And now I just tell ChatGPT to write me a formula that does this and it does it and I just hit copy. It's so cool. Another area that AI is helping is in extrapolating data from bank statements. So we've got a bank statement, it's got, the date, where you spent your money, how much money you spent, and I have it in a PDF. I need to get it into Excel. We're finding ways to pull that out. So lots of different ways. And then I would warn you though, so I'll use it as a preliminary resource to say I'm asking it a question and it'll point me to things. Always double check. There is a very funny thing that happened where it's funny now. I'm sure it wasn't funny for this person, where an attorney filed their brief, their trial brief or something that cited case law that did not exist. It sounded right. It sounded good, they had they had gone to ChatGPT and they had asked it for a specific case law on a certain issue, and it hallucinated it. So you have to be really careful about AI hallucinations, because that person got in big trouble, and it did not bode well for them.
Thank you, Megan. Question from Cheryl. If someone has a bookkeeper's certificate, how much further in coursework to complete to find some work doing this?
I mean, I think that's a good start if you're a bookkeeper, especially if you're proficient in QuickBooks. We use QuickBooks a lot. If you understand spreadsheets, I mean, that's really where you get your start. If you're looking to work in a forensic accounting firm, you don't necessarily have to be a CPA. If you want to, advance, if there's bigger firms you want to advance, become a partner, become a testifying expert, you're probably going to have to get your CPA, but that's not written in stone. But as a bookkeeper, if you have the skill set that you need, I don't see why you wouldn't just apply and tell them what skills you have.
Great. Thank you so much. Can we connect with you on LinkedIn, Megan?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I will put the handle in the chat if anyone want to connect with you. I hope this is you. I did a quick search.
Yeah.
Okay. Question from Eva. My sister divorce lawyer is not active. So should she hire her own CPA?
Ooh, that's interesting. Personally, I don't work with unrepresented individuals, because I can't give legal advice, and there's too many instances where what I'm doing may be considered legal advice. What I would recommend instead is she find a different divorce lawyer. So you gotta find a different person. But there are some CPAs out there who may work with an unrepresented party. But I think you're better off finding someone who's going to do what you need them to do.
Got it. Thank you. Question from Tiffany. Does your team really sign off at 4 p.m.? Really?
Heck yeah. So I'm one of those people who I can't work past by 3:30 I'm toast. So but I get up really early. So some of my teams, we get in at 8. So we get in at 8, we sign off at 4, and as far as I'm concerned, my staff leaves and they're done. I still do some work, but what I do instead of making everybody work, until the midnight hours, is I under promise and over deliver. So when I am talking to people, I'll say, hey, I can do this project, but it's going to take 4 months. And then I get it done in 3, and then I'm a hero. So that's I try to do that to the best of my ability. Is I try to make sure that I give realistic expectations of my turnaround time, and not say, oh, I'm going to get this done for you next week when it's definitely not going to happen. And then that just gives my staff time to get the work done within reasonable working hours. So, yep, we sign off at 4, shut the doors, walk out, we're done.
Good for you. Good for your team. Okay, another question. What do you think of Cory Doctorow's Martin Hinge novels about forensic accounting? Have you read?
Oh, I don't know about those, but I'm going to write that down.
Okay. Another question from Tiffany.
Writing it down.
I also got my advanced accounting certificate from Santa Clara in order to get my CPA certification. Oh, it's not a question. She mentioned that she got her advanced accounting certificate from
awesome.
Santa Clara. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, another question. What keeps you up at night as a forensic accountant firm owner? Are you an owner or
Yeah,
you are?
I'm,
Oh, okay. What keeps you up at night?
what keeps me up at night is mistakes, honestly. What keeps me up at night is whether I explain to my staff well enough what they were supposed to do, whether they caught all the subtle nuances, in a settlement conference statement or something that told us our instructions of what to do. Did we miss something? That's what keeps me up at night. Did I miss something? Did I just send out a report that has $100,000 error in it? In fact, I did that last night where I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about a tracing report that I did, and I said, "Wait, did we trace that piece? Was that community or separate?" And like thought about it for a while. So that's what keeps me up at night is missing things. But nobody's perfect, and I'm working on being okay with that.
Great. Thank you so much. Question from Chi. How can I mention the experience in my resume in applying for a forensic accountant job without doing any work before?
So when I say mention experience, what I mean is like I am a QuickBooks Pro advisor, or I have extensive Excel experience, and I can do anything that would be helpful to the forensic accounting firm. That if you're not, a CPA, or if you don't have the credentials that they're looking for, or the work experience they're looking for, you have the actual working knowledge that they're looking for, and then they can train you.
Got it. Okay, I see a comment from Amy. Please be very careful with AI. I prepared taxes. This year, I had several clients who used AI to prepare their taxes. They were completely incorrect. They were completed incorrectly, and money sent to the wrong IRS offices. I had to prepare amendments for these clients, costly to the clients, huge headache.
Yep, absolutely. That's why I said check everything. You don't want to be that guy who files the trial brief with the incorrect citations that don't exist. So use AI, with a grain of salt, ask it your things, and then double check. So like with bank statements, when we're extrapolating the bank statement data, we are checking against the supporting documents and making sure that the balances match, that we have the information right. I did have a thing, something a few weeks ago where it had extrapolated an incorrect name for some reason from the line item on a bank statement. It didn't matter, but the client was like, "I don't know who this person is," and it was wrong. So yeah, I agree. Be very careful with AI.
Got it. The question from Joseph. I have a friend that is co-beneficiary with his sister who is trustee. She tells him he will lose his inheritance if he requests an accounting of what is happening with the trust. Is
What?
that standard practice?
No, no, you're entitled. I'm not giving anyone advice on anything, but you may want to talk to an attorney. Uh, that's if you're a co-trustee, you're entitled to an accounting of what is happening. Why would you lose your inheritance? That doesn't make any sense. That sounds like a threat. I don't know. I don't know the situation. I don't know why they're saying that. Maybe because I could see that if you got into a lawsuit situation, you'd end up spending all your money on attorneys. That is a big problem that we see with those kind of cases, is that the litigation outweighs the benefit of getting the accounting. But unless there's some weird provision in there that says they'll lose their inheritance or something, I would look into that. I don't know. That's not really an accounting question, but I will give that answer.
Thank you so much, Megan. That's the last question. And the time now is 4 p.m. Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan, for your insightful and engaging presentation on the career of a forensic accountant. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you all find the presentation both engaging and helpful. We'll be sending out an evaluation survey along with Megan's presentation slides and a link to today's recording. Your feedback is very important to us, so please take a moment to share your thoughts to help us improve future programs. Thanks once again, everyone. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye
Thanks,
now.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Appreciate it. Bye.